Welcome to Occult Archives. We uncover the mysteries, the myths, and the legends behind history's, well, I guess you could say most feared books. Really, the books that have sparked the most debate.
Yeah, those infamous books.
Yeah. We're your guide to these complex and often kind of unsettling stories. We're not here to sensationalize anything. We break it down, keep it natural, and hopefully spark a bit of curiosity, maybe some wonder along the way.
It's all about getting to that
Mhm.
core.
Mm.
What makes these books so captivating for so long?
Right. So this time, we're diving into
Oh, this is a good one.
episode 172, The Immortal Alchemist, the initiatory journey of the Most Holy Trinosophia. Now, you brought some fascinating sources about this book, or manuscript, really, right?
Manuscript.
And of course, the mysterious figure behind it.
Always a mysterious figure.
Always. So we're going to sift through all this, extract those golden nuggets, and try to, decipher what's really going on.
Exactly. So we've got a double mystery here.
Right.
First, the Comte de Saint-Germain, often called the most baffling personality of modern history. Where did he come from? Who was he really? Those debates still rage on.
They do. And then, of course, the Most Holy Trinosophia itself.
Full of symbolism.
Oh, loaded with it.
Trying to unveil those secrets.
Exactly. So the Comte de Saint-Germain, it's a name that just, I don't know, whispers mystery.
It does. He's one of those figures that just defies explanation. What's interesting is, even though his real identity is uncertain, people who met him just accepted him. He had this noble air about him, this refinement.
Like he belonged in those aristocratic circles.
Exactly, like he'd been born into it.
And he always maintained that composure, that innate dignity. Even though his background was this big question mark, there's even a London publication that links him to Prince Ricassi of Transylvania.
Oh, wow.
And the Medici family.
Connecting him to these powerhouses of Europe.
Powerful families.
Exactly. And Cesico Cantu, the librarian in Milan, he also backs that Riccati connection. So there might be something there. Maybe he even studied at the University of Siena. Who knows?
Yeah.
What's also wild is the sheer number of names he used. It's like he was intentionally trying to be elusive.
Like smoke. It is a long list. Mrs. Cooper Oakley, she documents all these aliases between 1710 and 1822. Marquis de Montferrat, Comte Bellemoire, or Aymar, Chevalier Schoening, Chevalier Weldon, Comte Soltikoff, Graf d'Argy, Prince Ragazzi, and of course, Comte de Saint-Germain.
Right, the one that stuck. And for some of those more mystical writers, it goes even deeper. They link him to other shadowy figures.
Like who?
Well, the Comte de Gabalet, Signor Gualdi, and Count Hompish, he was the last Grand Master of the Knights of Malta.
Oh, wow.
So these guys, they're already shrouded in mystery.
And then there's the occult connections.
Right, it blurs the line between history and legend. So what did this guy actually look like?
Yeah, when people met him, what did they see?
Well, there's a lot of consistency in the descriptions. Generally, medium height, well-proportioned, regular features. Pleasant looking. His skin was a bit darker, and he had dark hair, often powdered, typical for the time. But it was his eyes.
People always talk about the eyes.
You're captivating,
Yeah.
mesmerizing.
Like they held some power. And then there are the claims he made. Eternal youth, knowing Cleopatra, hanging out with the Queen of Sheba. It's a bit out there.
It sounds fantastical, but what's fascinating is how his contemporaries reacted. You'd think they'd dismiss him as crazy, but no. He was just eccentric, this different understanding of time, of history.
Like the rules didn't apply to him. Madame de Lamar, in her memoirs, Souvenirs de Marie Antoinette, she paints a very detailed picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She describes his figure, well-knit, graceful.
She noticed all that.
Oh, yeah. Delicate hands, small feet. She even mentions his shapely legs.
He was wearing silk stockings, you said.
Yes. Close-fitting garments. Magnificent teeth, a charming dimple on his chin, and those eyes. She said she'd never seen anything like them.
And this is important. She talks about his unrestricted access to the royal private apartments.
Like from 1768, early on.
That's a huge level of trust.
Yeah.
They really valued him in the inner circle of the French court.
They did. So beyond this, captivating persona and those outrageous claims, he was also brilliantly intelligent, scholarly linguist.
Oh, absolutely. His language skills were almost supernatural. German, English, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, even with a Piedmontese accent.
Yeah.
Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Arabic, Chinese.
Mm.
And he was mistaken for a native speaker everywhere he went. There's this quote, one author describes him as learned, speaking every civilized language, admirably, a great musician, an excellent chemist.
Wow.
So even those who were skeptical, they had to acknowledge his breadth of knowledge.
Like he was a true Renaissance man.
Ahead of his time. And Madame de Pompadour, She really vouches for him.
She does.
Talks about his knowledge, his memory, his erudition. It all just came out so naturally in his conversations. And he could adjust.
Adapt.
Yet to the tone, the subject, always bringing something new, unexpected, even to everyday topics.
Like what?
Well, she mentions anecdotes from the Valois court, even about figures from much earlier, like super specific details. You get the feeling he'd witnessed it all firsthand. He'd talk about traveling in Asia, Africa, his understanding of the Russian, Turkish, Austrian courts, more intimate than even the king's diplomats.
Like he'd lived through it all, which of course feeds right back into those claims of, well, living for centuries, but his abilities went beyond just speaking and remembering. He was ambidextrous, right?
Oh yeah, that was amazing. He could write the same text with both hands, and when you put the pages together, perfect alignment. Imagine that.
Wow.
And he could repeat whole pages after reading them once. And to demonstrate his brain working independently, he'd write a love letter with one hand and mystical verses with the other simultaneously.
Incredible. And let's not forget his singing, right? A talented singer, too.
Right, a true polymath. It's almost too much for one person. And then we get into the really unexplained stuff, like knowing when he was needed elsewhere and appearing places without using doors.
Like a ghost.
Right, just appearing in rooms. No one saw him come in. And then there's that story from Franz Grafer. Saint-Germain predicted trains and steamboats, like a century before they happened.
Predicting the future.
Yeah, in the 18th century. That's some serious foresight. Or maybe something else. And his historical knowledge, it wasn't just textbook stuff. He recalled events from the past 2,000 years with such detail, like he was there at the court of Francis I.
Like an eyewitness.
Exactly. In the all-the-year-round account, they describe him mimicking the king's voice, his mannerisms, everything. And he'd captivate people with stories of Louis XIV, describing places and people from centuries past. So vivid.
Then there are the eating habits, part of his whole longevity thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was very specific. Refused most food. Insisted on his own special meals. Oatmeal, groats, chicken. Rarely drank wine. Super careful about not catching colds. And get this, he'd go to dinners but wouldn't eat. Just spend the whole time telling stories.
Entertained.
Keeping everyone captivated.
A very different kind of guy. And then he casually mentions owning Moses's wand. I know, almost comical.
It's like he was playing with them,
Maybe. The memoir writers, they admit to being in this constant state of disbelief, like it was all too much to believe. But then the precision of his information, his knowledge, it made you think, maybe.
Like that story about him asking his valet, Roger, about something from, quote, 500 years prior.
And Roger's like, I've only been with you 5 centuries.
Right. It's perfect. It captures that whole persona.
Right.
So he's got these strange eating habits, but he maintained a pretty impressive household in Paris.
Oh, he did. 2 valets, 4 lackeys.
In livery.
Hired carriage. And then the clothes.
The clothes. He had a collection. Buttons, studs, watches, rings, chains, diamonds. Tons of them. Rotated them weekly.
Wow.
And Baron Gleichen, he described seeing Saint-Germain's art collection. A Murillo.
A Murillo.
He said it was comparable to Raphael. And then the jewels.
I was just going to ask about the jewels.
A huge opal. White sapphire the size of an egg. And Gleichen knew his gems, right?
Yeah.
He was convinced they were real. Saint-Germain could also spot a fake painting instantly. And he was a good painter himself.
Really?
Yeah, had a secret for making those brilliant colors using powdered mother of pearl.
Interesting.
He knew chemistry too, apparently. Maybe even made luminous paint.
Like glow-in-the-dark paint.
Yeah, way back then. And he could remove flaws from diamonds and emeralds. Apparently he did it for Louis XV.
So taking imperfect stones and making them perfect?
Exactly. Sounds impossible, but pops up in a bunch of sources. And then there's the Comtesse de Saint-Germain, this elderly woman who ran into him. She'd met him 50 years earlier in Venice when he was Marquis Belletti.
Wow, that's a long time.
Right. And they talk about this elixir. Supposedly kept her young all those years.
The elixir of youth.
It all ties into his supposed longevity, alchemy.
Right.
And Madame de Haussett writes about Madame de Pompadour asking Saint-Germain about this elixir. His answer, he was afraid to give the king an unknown drug, like he was worried.
But he's the master alchemist, right?
Supposedly. So it feels like he was being careful.
Maybe putting on a show?
Maybe. He was friendly with Louis VI, though. They talk about precious stones for hours. The king was fascinated by him.
And Saint-Germain wasn't there asking for favors. He was the patron, not the one being patronized. Louis VI seemed to see him as a, advisor, offering wisdom, warnings, maybe even prophecies.
What if the king had listened? Things might have been different.
Maybe. Madame de Pompadour also mentions Saint-Germain gave the king Anne her gifts, showing off that wealth, I guess.
It's true. So beyond all this, he understood European politics. He had diplomatic skills, credentials to get into the highest circles of nobility. He was in Russia during Peter the Great, Persia, in the 1730s, 1740s.
He was everywhere, and he met everyone. Frederick the Great, Voltaire, Madame de Pompadour, Rousseau, Chatham, Walpole.
And they were all curious about him.
Yeah, where did he come from? What was his deal? It's like he was playing all these different roles. Jacobite agent, conspirator, alchemist, art expert, a Russian general, and of course, the musician.
Right. Violin concerts at Versailles, conducting orchestras without even using a score. In London, his compositions were published by Walsh. Clearly a talented and prolific artist.
Yeah, he was making a name for himself in the music world, and his musical sensibility extended to everyday life, too. There's a story from the London Chronicle about him. He was at a musical gathering, and they were unloading stones outside.
Oh, no.
He said he was stunned with a whole cartload of discords.
I love that. So he really did experience the world through music. And then there's Casanova.
Casanova. He mentions Saint-Germain in his memoirs, too, doesn't he?
Oh, tons of times. He's skeptical, of course. But he acknowledges the talent, the magic, the languages, the music, the chemistry. Saint-Germain even had a way with the ladies. Casanova figures it was partly because he was so good at making pigments and cosmetics,
The beauty secrets.
helping them stay youthful.
And they had that strange encounter in Belgium, right? Saint-Germain talking about starting a hat factory, treating Casanova with 15 pills, and then the magistrum, that white liquid that just disappeared.
Coof!
It's all very mysterious.
Like advanced chemistry?
Alchemy.
Maybe. Casanova was never really convinced, but he couldn't deny the skills.
And then Saint-Germain supposedly turns a coin into gold right in front of him.
Right, a 12 sols piece into gold.
Incredible.
I know, Casanova suspected trickery, of course.
Of course.
But Saint-Germain's attitude towards the doubters was dismissive, like he was above it all.
Like, I don't have to prove anything to you.
Exactly. And Casanova wasn't the only one to witness these transmutations.
Right. The Marquis de Valbel also described a silver coin turning to gold.
In Saint-Germain's lab. And the Comtesse d'Ademar, she kept one of these gold coins
As proof.
until it was stolen. So these stories, they add to the whole alchemy legend.
They do. And Saint-Germain, he claimed he learned this occult chemistry in Asia, India. Even mentioned learning about melting jewels on his second trip to India.
That's interesting. And there's that whole thing with the Leopold Hoffman medal.
Another transmutation story.
It's a bit of a separate case, but it fits the time period, the themes.
So, okay, here's the thing. With all this mystery, all the claims, there's no real proof that he was just an adventurer, a con man. He was never actually caught in a lie. He kept secrets, and no one knew where his money came from. But his credit was good. He didn't use banks, but he had wealth.
That's true. And H.P. Blavatsky defended him against accusations of being a spy. She said there's no evidence that he was connected to this Eastern wisdom.
Right.
It all comes back to the source of his knowledge. He talked about his father being the secret doctrine and his mother the mysteries. So cryptic.
Very esoteric.
Right. So there's this connection to these ancient hidden teachings. We know he was familiar with Oriental esotericism, practiced Eastern meditation. He even had retreats in the Himalayas. And he mentioned being obedient to a higher power.
Maybe the mystery school, right? The one that supposedly sent him on his mission.
Could be. Some esoteric traditions even consider him and Sir Francis Bacon as the two greatest emissaries of this secret brotherhood in the last 1,000 years.
Wow.
So his principles, they seem Rosicrucian, Gnostic. The belief is he was a key figure, maybe even the leader in Rosicrucianism during the 18th century.
Some even suggest he was a driving force behind the French Revolution.
That's a big claim.
It is, and there's the idea that Lord Bulwer-Lytton's Zanoni is about him.
Oh, really?
It cements his place in occult legend.
It does. And then there's Freemasonry.
Right, there are documented connections there, although some people try to downplay them.
But there's that Masonic minute book, right? With his and Lafayette's signatures.
And Cagliostro claimed Saint-Germain initiated him into the Knights Templar.
So there are definite ties there. And Madame d'Ademar, she kept copies of Saint-Germain's verses.
Prophetic verses about the fall of the French Empire.
And then there's that dramatic story. Saint-Germain, under the name Cassandra, told Madame d'Ademar the fate of the French monarchy, Marie Antoinette, Lafayette, even the future of France.
Like a true prophet.
And he was right. Then, just like that, he disappears from France. Vanishes.
The Transcendentalists believe he returned to his secret order.
It's a fitting end for a man of mystery.
It is. We do have those memoirs of Charles, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, that give us a glimpse into Saint-Germain's later years.
Oh, right. He was still involved in the occult, Masonic mysteries, close with Prince Charles doing alchemy research, having these deep discussions at Louisenland.
And he supposedly died in 1784, right, on Prince Charles's estate.
That's what people say. But the circumstances were odd, like maybe it was staged.
A mock funeral.
Could be. Blavatsky didn't believe he died then. She mentioned alleged sightings afterward. The Empress of Russia, Princess de Lamballe, Jean de Berry.
And Comte de Saint-Germain claimed to have talked to him in Venice in 1788. Madame d'Adhemar had encounters with him after his death, too. Even the Encyclopedia Britannica mentions him attending a Masonic conference after 1784.
It's like he just kept popping up. Andrew Lang called him a will-o'-the-wisp in those memoirs.
So elusive. What are we to make of him? What was his purpose?
It's still a mystery. But there's this idea that he represents forces guiding humanity at critical moments. Maybe we need to consider the occult to understand his impact.
Okay, so from this enigmatic figure, we turn to his enigmatic book, La Très Sainte Trinosophia.
The Most Holy Trinosophia. This manuscript is considered hugely important, especially for those interested in Freemasonry and occult sciences. It's thought to be the only mystical writing we have from Saint-Germain.
The only one.
And it's an extraordinary Hermetic document.
Talking about ancient wisdom, alchemy, esoteric knowledge.
Exactly. There are tons of rare occult texts out there, but this one might be the most significant.
And there's that rumor about Saint-Germain having this massive library.
A secret library.
Yeah. Preparing manuscripts for his followers, all supposedly vanished when he disappeared.
Taken by the secret society.
Maybe. We do know he had a copy of the Vatican manuscript of the Kabbalah. And Blavatsky, in The Secret Doctrine, quotes from a manuscript supposed to be by Saint-Germain. She focuses on the meaning of numbers.
That's intriguing. And Mahatma Kudhumi mentions a ciphered manuscript by Saint-Germain kept with Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel.
So there are whispers of other writing.
Right. But what's surprising is how little solid information we have about his actual Masonic and metaphysical beliefs. The 18th century memoirs, they're full of stories, but not a lot of doctrine.
Right. So this deep dive into La Très Sainte Trinosophia, this is our chance. It's like a window into his esoteric teachings, even if they are hidden behind symbolism.
Exactly. Decoding those symbols.
So what can you tell us about this manuscript itself? Physically, I mean.
Okay, so it's cataloged as MS No, 2400 in the French Library at Troyes. 96 leaves, written only on one side. The calligraphy is beautiful, but there are some spelling and accent inconsistencies.
Maybe the copyist wasn't totally familiar with the original.
Yeah, that's possible. The French is very scholarly, dramatic. And there are all these amazing illustrations in full color.
Beautiful.
Each section starts and ends with little symbols. Then there are these scattered letters, words, phrases in ancient languages, magical symbols, Egyptian-looking hieroglyphics, some cuneiform words, and at the end, a few ciphered leaves. It seems to have been made in the late 18th century, but the content might come from much older sources.
So it's a bit of a patchwork. What about its history? How did it end up in Troy?
It's a bit of a journey. Cagliostro apparently carried it when he went to Rome.
And he ended up, well?
Imprisoned by the Inquisition. The manuscript was lost for a while. Then a general in Napoleon's army got hold of it. When he died, the Bibliothèque de Troyes bought it. Pretty cheap.
Wow.
Then there's Griot de Givry. He says it was bought at Marshal Massena's sale. And inside was this note, claiming it was the only copy of Saint-Germain's Trinosophia. Apparently, the Comte destroyed the original.
He didn't want it falling into the wrong hands?
Maybe. And the note connects the manuscript to Cagliostro, saying the Inquisition seized it.
Which makes sense, given his trip to Rome.
And Cagliostro and his wife did visit Saint-Germain in Holstein.
So there's a connection there.
Definitely. De Givry describes the book as Kabbalized alchemy, and he calls Saint-Germain an enigmatic alchemist who, if we believe the manuscript, died in the Inquisition's dungeons.
A dramatic ending, but, that last part is mostly speculation.
Yeah, we don't have proof of that.
So the title, La Très Sainte Trinosophia, the Most Holy Threefold Wisdom. It's intriguing. Are there links to other groups, movements?
Well, maybe Jean-Marie Regan's Masonic Brotherhood, Les Theosophists.
They were founded in 1805.
Right. Regan, he was a respected occultist. Blavatsky thought highly of him, his knowledge.
So maybe he knew Saint-Germain?
Possibly, earlier in his life, or at least knew of his society. Regan was called the most learned Mason of the 19th century. Gave a lot of lectures on initiation.
He did. The manuscript also has this Egyptian-influenced interpretation of Freemasonic symbolism.
right? Like Rigon, Court de Gablon, Alexandre Lenoir, they all had that. And Rigon's rite of Misraim, with its 90 degrees, there might be something there.
And Cagliostro's Egyptian Freemasonry.
Right. Maybe they all got it from Saint-Germain.
Or a shared source, a group of illuminists.
Could be. And the manuscript uses all these ancient languages: Chaldean Hebrew, Ionic Greek, Arabic, Syriac, cuneiform, Greek hieroglyphics, ideographs. Clearly, whoever wrote it was drawing on these ancient traditions.
Pulling from those sources.
And there's this recurring idea about the coming age, when the leg of the grand man, Aquarius, aligns with the waterman of the zodiac.
At the equinox.
Right. The end of a 400,000-year cycle.
Wow.
So it ties into those apocalyptic ideas, a new heaven and a new earth.
A new spiritual era.
A transformation of humanity.
It's a powerful concept. And just to remind everyone, this manuscript is probably a copy, as that note from Philotom says.
Right. So there might be some inaccuracies.
Little imperfections because the copyist maybe didn't understand everything.
But still, it says in our source, this might be the most precious known manuscript of occultism.
It gives us a glimpse into that world, into Saint-Germain's teachings. So what does the Most Holy Trinosophia actually tell us? Let's go through it section by section.
All right, so section 1, we start with drama.
Oh.
Yeah, the author is a prisoner in the Inquisition's dungeons. Some people think this might be Cagliostro, based on the timing.
Okay.
He's writing to someone called Philotatus, promising to teach him these profound secrets. And the dungeon itself, it's not just a literal prison. It's an allegory for, like, humanity's base consciousness, the animalistic part of us.
Where the soul is trapped waiting for initiation.
Right. So the soul is being tortured, but this is part of the process.
And the monarchs who rule this dungeon.
They're the illusions of the material world, what the manuscript calls the princes of this world.
What keeps us trapped?
Yeah.
The temptations.
Exactly, the false values. And the author warns about the misuse of power, about not being discreet. These are dangerous pitfalls that come from pride. He even talks about a time when he had great power and happiness, but he lost it all because he spoke unwisely. So he's warning Philotatus not to fall into the same trap.
Don't give in to those desires.
Right. So it's a cautionary tale, but it also promises this deeper understanding. Then section 2.
What happens in section 2?
The initiatory journey begins.
Okay.
It starts at the Solfatara volcano. The neophyte, veiled, holding a golden bough, approaches an iron altar.
The veil representing the state of those seeking initiation.
Exactly. The mysteries.
And the volcano.
A powerful image is the alchemical furnace, the home of those subterranean deities, powers of transformation.
And the golden bough, like Aeneas in Virgil's epic.
Right. It's a passport to the underworld.
But also symbolic of something deeper?
It represents that divine spark within us, the inner light, what some call the brain aura.
It guides the way.
Then the earth trembles, and the neophyte descends into a vast cavern.
Into the unknown, the Dark Mother.
Yes. He's given a white robe, the seamless garment of experience, and a copper lamp.
Symbolizing
Enlightened love that guides him through the darkness. He then enters a dark passage leading to a square chamber with 4 doors.
4 doors.
A hall of choosing. Black, red, blue, white, each representing a different path. Black for asceticism, red for faith, blue for purification, white for adeptship.
So many choices.
Right. Which path will he choose?
Okay, what happens next?
So section 3. The neophyte finds this white marble platform next to a huge body of water. He's guided by a star.
A single star.
And then he throws himself into the water.
What?
It seems like a divine command. And an unseen hand puts the copper lamp on his head.
To light his way.
He struggles towards a distant light, and then a boat appears. There's a crowned man in it. He tells the neophyte, "Come with me." Offers him guidance. The neophyte refuses. He quotes scripture, says, "It is better to trust in the Lord."
So he rejects the offered help.
And the boat, it sinks. The neophyte reaches the shore. There's a silver wall inlaid with red marble panels. They have sacred writing, Greek letters, and then there's an iron circle and 2 lions, one red, one black, girding a golden crown. There's also a bow and arrows.
The lions representing.
They're the forces of tyranny, the black lion, and lust, the red lion. To reach wisdom, the crown, you have to overcome them.
And the bow and arrows.
Will to do it, to slay those desires.
So he's faced with these symbolic challenges. What happens in section 4?
Another trial. A lake of fire appears. A voice commands him to cross it.
Talk about a trial by fire.
He enters the flames, but they don't burn him.
Wow.
He comes to a circular space with 40 columns of fire. One side white, the other shadowed. In the center is an altar, shaped like a serpent,
The serpent.
the astral light, and a voice tells him to take a sword and strike the serpent,
What does that represent?
destroying the ego, controlling those astral forces through will, spiritual will. He strikes the serpent, and the altar and columns vanish. The sound echoes. A hand lifts him up, through the vault, past all these shadowy figures, hydras, lamias, serpents,
All driven back by the sword.
the power of the will. And finally he ascends, up through the earth into the light of day.
So he's overcome these challenges, and then section 5.
A rapid ascent. He's led by an unseen guide, leaves the earth behind. Goes up so high the earth is just a cloud. Goes up and down, then up to an incredible height. He sees globes, other earths, then something touches his eyes, and he faints.
What happens when he wakes up?
He's on a comfy cushion, surrounded by fragrances. He's wearing a blue robe with golden stars. Opposite him is a yellow altar with a pure flame that burns on its own. There are black letters on it. Above, there's a lighted torch symbolizing pure light and a bird.
Another bird.
This one has black feet, a silver body, red head, black wings, golden neck. And it can only fly in the flames of the torch. It's holding a green branch.
The branch representing?
To be given the life. Immortality.
So many layers of meaning.
And the altar, it's called the crown, Kether, the highest point.
Wait, inscription.
When shall be the gate of entrance?
Asking the question.
And the torch is called light, with the inscription, the dernier shall be hidden away and forgotten. Meaning the physical body, the personality of the wise.
That's all hidden.
The altar, the bird, the torch, they represent all things. And above the altar, there's a crux ansata, made of copper,
Venus.
symbolizing generation, fecundity.
Okay, so we have this incredibly symbolic scene. What happens next?
Section 6. He sees this massive triangular palace resting on clouds.
The archetypal sphere?
Yes. 4 tiers of columns, white, black, green, red. Topped with a golden ball, the doors open, and this old man comes out. The Hierophant, master of the hidden house. He's wearing a similar robe, but with a golden sun on his breast. He has a green branch, a censer, and a Zoroaster-like tiara. He speaks in Persian, telling the neophyte to worship God.
This is a powerful figure.
Very powerful. He explains that the neophyte missed a chance. He could have instantly become one with the altar, bird, and torch, but now he has to take a longer path.
He missed that shortcut.
He leads the neophyte into a huge hall representing the universe. 360 columns, a 4-colored cross above. In the center is a triangular altar.